We're waiting just another minute. It looks like we've got maybe another class. What do you think, Alan? Does it look like we've got everyone now?
It looks like everyone's in now.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Erin from Silver River Museum.
And I'm Alan Ivory with the Ford Museum up in Gainesville.
And we are so excited you've joined us for this week's Fact or Fiction. We've got some exciting stuff today, Alan, don't we?
Yes, we do.
What are we talking about today, Alan?
These little critters that live in the water.
Ooh, all right. I'm going to screen share real quick, and we're going to take a look at the handout that you may or may not have in front of you, just to give you a sneak peek. So here's what the handout looks like. Today's Nature of Science benchmark is about comparing observations. Sometimes different groups will make observations. They'll use different tools, and the observations will be different. And as good, thoughtful scientists, we need to know why those observations might be different. So today's claim that we want to decide if it's fact or fiction is that a scientist's observations are always fair. We have a fancy word for fair observations. It's called unbiased. So we want to know if it's fact or fiction, and we're going to take a look at some critters called crayfish to help us decide that. Let me stop screen sharing. Alan, I'm going to toss it over to you to introduce today's special guest.
Well, today we have Dr. Reisinger, who has her PhD in biology and works with these special little crayfish. And we also have Nicole, who's a lab tech with her in her lab. So take it away, guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And Nicole and I are going to tell you about some of the research we do in my lab. And we're going to tell you about crayfish, which is one of the main things that we study in our lab. And I don't know if any of you have seen these in the wild because they like to hide during the day and come out at night. So sometimes these are all around in the lakes and rivers and streams and stormwater ponds, but you might not see them even if they're there. So one thing you might not know is there's a lot of different species of crayfish, just like there's a lot of different species of fish. So in the whole world, there are 750 different species of these guys. And most of them actually live in the United States, and they live right here in the southeastern United States. So we have a lot of species of crayfish in Florida. So these guys live in freshwater environments, and they eat things like dead leaves or aquatic insects. And they're predators, so things that eat them would be like fish like bass or sunfish, or sometimes things like raccoons or herons eat them as well. And so a lot of what we do in my lab is we study crayfish, and we look at interactions between different species, because we have a problem sort of across the world where a lot of the species of crayfish live in only a tiny little area. So like maybe they'll live in a couple streams. And when new crayfish get introduced, sometimes we find that they fight with each other and can actually displace a species from its whole habitat, its whole area. So that's one of the major things we study in our lab. And so, so Nicole has conducted quite a few experiments looking at that. And she's gonna really quickly sort of show you the setup for some of her experiments. And then after that, we'll show you a video actually of one of the experiments, and you'll have the opportunity to try to figure out which crayfish is aggressive and which one is sort of winning interactions with the other crayfish.
Yeah, so I'll show you.
Nicole, can I interrupt for just a minute? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I forgot to tell my teachers about the Kahoot. I know they're sitting there with their Chromebook saying, when do we join? So whenever you're ready to get into the video interaction, we'll take a little pause. I will share the Kahoot game pin, and teachers, I'll type it into chat as well, because that is how students are going to record their observations. Okay. Sorry, teachers. Sorry, Nicole and Dr. Reisinger, to interrupt. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. You want me to video you?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of what I do is I look at these crayfish that kind of don't belong in the streams that they're in. So that we look at interactions between an invasive crayfish and a native crayfish. So the first experiment I'm going to show you here is one where we look at the interactions between the two. So we have like a plexiglass divider in the middle, and then we'll lift it, and then we'll watch the crayfish kind of fight each other. Sometimes we'll just sit there and you have to wait a little bit, but we have some good videos to show you them in action. And then the second experiment that we do is an activity experiment. So we'll look at the activity between the two crayfish. And the activity is basically when they cross the lines in these little kiddie pools. So one is actually kind of crossing now, so you can see that. And then the last experiment that I mainly do is a shelter competition experiment. So we'll look at the two species and we'll observe which crayfish is inside the shelter. And then that kind of helps us determine what's happening in the actual streams.
Okay. So I think maybe what we'll do, maybe we will, since we just talked about the experiments, maybe we'll go ahead and share our videos with you. So the video, and then like after that, maybe we'll walk around the lab a little more and I can show you a couple other things in the lab. So the videos that we're gonna watch today are exactly what Nicole just explained. So this is a video we took looking at the interaction between a native crayfish species and an invasive crayfish species. And we're looking at when they interact, which one is more aggressive and which one sort of wins a competition. Because that can tell us in the field whether, or sort of how one is replacing another, or whether that's likely to happen. And so what we want you guys to do is see, if you watch this video, if you can tell which crayfish is the most aggressive, or you can tell who is kind of winning the competitions. And you'll see there's two crayfish in these videos. There's one that has a white mark, and so we called that one the white marked crayfish. And then there's one that doesn't have any mark on it. So that's the unmarked crayfish. So you want to see if the one with the white mark or the unmarked one is more aggressive.
Dr. Reisinger, let's get him to join the Kahoot. That way, right after the video, you can have them do the poll, okay? So before she starts the video, I'm going to screen share real quick, my friends, so that you can join the Kahoot. There we go. So you should see the game pin. And teachers, I've typed it in chat as well, because I'm going to stop screen sharing in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and join that Kahoot. I'm not going to start it until Dr. Reisinger tells me that we're ready to start it for the poll. It'll be after her video. Oh, and I love these random nicknames that it comes up with. So we'll give it just another minute and we'll get some more to join the Kahoot. And then I'm going to stop screen sharing and we'll be able to watch that crayfish competition video. Teachers, if you have not already written that game pin on your whiteboard or made a note of it somewhere, it is in chat, but go ahead and jot it down if you have some students that are taking a little longer to join, because I am going to go ahead and stop screen sharing in just a minute, but they can still join even if it's not up on the screen. All right, so we should have that pin jotted down now. I'm going to stop screen sharing and hand it back to Dr. Reisinger.
Okay. So let me just bring up my video and then I will screen share as well. Oh yes, I turned the sound off. I can't do that. So I'm going to share my screen and then I'll make the video big. Okay, so here is here's the video. I'm going to play it. And so what you want to see is you're going to be watching these two crayfish, the one with the white mark and the unmarked one. And you're going to try to see which one you think is more aggressive. And so you're going to see them come together and interact and try to figure out which one's most aggressive. And the video is about a minute long. So we're going to see what these guys do for 1 minute. Okay. So now we should do the Kahoot. I don't know if do I need to stop screen sharing for that? Is that?
Yes, I think you'll need to stop screen sharing and then I will start screen sharing.
Okay.
I don't know what happens if both of us screen share at once. All right, so you guys are going to be answering some questions that Dr. Reisinger has made about this interaction. We've got 2. Here we go. And you'll have 30 seconds to answer the poll question. Which crayfish in the video was most aggressive? Crayfish with white mark, unmarked crayfish, or both were equally aggressive? All right, there's your results, Dr. Reisinger.
All right, the unmarked crayfish. So that is the native species, actually, right, Nicole?
Yes, it is.
in our interaction. Okay, let's see what we think about the about who won the competitions.
Okay, one more question for this one. Which crayfish won the most competitive interactions with the other crayfish? Crayfish with the white mark, unmarked crayfish, or both won an equal number of interactions?
Okay, the unmarked crayfish again. That one was that one was winning everything. So you might notice that we did have quite a few different responses. So different people sort of had different viewpoints on who was most aggressive and who was the winner. And that's something that when we're looking at animal behavior, it's really important that we try to get rid of or like reduce observer bias like that in the lab. So make sure that we have concrete rules so that we don't sort of let our impressions guide us. So like, I think in this case, probably the unmarked crayfish was the most aggressive, but or maybe it did win more competitions, but you can imagine a case where you have a preconceived notion of which one might be more aggressive or might be the winner. And that might sort of color how you perceive their interactions with one another. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I want to show you guys one of the ways that we try to control for this kind of bias in the lab. And this is commonly done for animal behavior studies. So, well, first let me get it up here. So one of the tools we use is called an ethogram, and an ethogram is just a list of really specific behaviors that allows us to characterize how aggressive or like some behavioral trait in a crayfish or in a species in general. So you can see here we have an example of an ethogram that we would use for crayfish aggression, where what we would do is we would watch this entire video and we would give the crayfish a score of how aggressive it is based on sort of the most aggressive behavior it does the whole time. And you can see here, like if it only flips away from the other crayfish or backs away, it would get a really low score. Or if it ignores the crayfish, it would get a 0. If it starts sort of going after the other crayfish, or if it starts fighting and grabbing and pulling, we would give it the highest score. And so if both crayfish are doing these aggressive behaviors, they would actually both get a really high aggression score. And then we can also make rules about who wins a competition. So we can define a competition as any time the crayfish come together. And basically the crayfish that doesn't back away is the crayfish that we consider to have won. And usually we say like it has to have moved like at least a body length, at least it's the length of its body backwards. And then the competition is over. So we can actually score this video in a way that's you know, easier to be sure that we're scoring the same thing every time we watch it, or that everyone would score it the same. So I'd like to show you the video one more time, kind of with this in mind. And maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll see if I can actually keep this in the screen, so you can have this up. Okay. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to show the video again. And so I'd like everyone to try to do this one more time, but to use the ethogram and what we talked about for the competitive interactions. So you want to see what the most aggressive behavior each crayfish does. You know, does it do a really aggressive behavior? And if it does, you want to give it that number of points. And that way you can tell which one is actually more aggressive. And you can actually look at who's winning the competitions. So we're going to watch it one more time. Here we go. Okay. So now I'll stop sharing my screen and we can do the Kahoot again.
Perfect. So we're going to have the same Kahoot questions again, but this time you've used a tool to make your observations. So we're going to see if the results from our poll are any different. Which crayfish in the video was most aggressive? And hopefully this time you had some points to help you decide. What do you think of this result?
The unmarked crayfish. So I think I actually would have said, what would you have said, Nicole?
I would have said the unmarked crayfish.
Would you have said the unmarked crayfish? I actually would have said they're equally aggressive because I think they both were 3. So maybe we haven't solved the issue of observer bias. But I do think maybe we're seeing maybe slightly less variation in the responses.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, let's see about the second question.
Which crayfish won the most competitive interactions with the other crayfish?
Unmarked crayfish. And I think I would agree with that. How many interactions did you see, Nicole?
I saw like 5 or 6 main ones.
Yeah, and I would, something like that. And I would say that the white crayfish won at least one of them.
Yeah.
maybe only one. All right. So I don't know. So I don't know if maybe it's time for questions. I don't know how you guys want to do this.
Yes. So we have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
And so my thinking is we're going to give our teachers about a minute or so to write their questions in chat, just speak with your class, get some questions and whatnot. And then I'll ask Dr. Reisner and see what the answers to your questions are. So take about a minute or so to write your questions in chat.
And while you're typing your questions, I just want to comment on your handout for the critical thinking portion. There is a question about how you would make observations of a cartwheel contest. So students, maybe that's the kind of thing that you would make an ethogram for. If you make them, share them with us. We'd love to see them. We'd love to give you a shout out. We'd love to share them with Dr. Reisinger to see what you learned.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start asking some of our questions. The first question we have is from a Stewart's class, and it's why are crayfish so fast?
That is a great question. They're faster than you would think, and they're very good at escaping things. So they're probably it's probably really helpful for them to be fast, so they can do things like escape their predators or competitors or find their food.
Okay, that makes sense. And also, why do they jump back?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Crayfish can walk forward, but the only way that they can swim is backwards. And what they're doing is they're flipping their tail underneath them, and it makes them go really fast. So if they need to get away fast, that is the best move that they can do.
Huh. So we have Leon's class, and they would like to know, are crayfish different species?
Yeah, there are tons of different species, and the 2 that we watched in the video were different species. These are both Florida crayfish. One of them is native to a drainage called the Black Creek drainage, so a stream called the Black Creek. And then the other one got introduced there, we think, because people were using it as bait for fishing, and some of them got out. And so we're trying to look at their interactions in the stream.
All right. Mr. Fran's class would like to know, where can crayfish come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's crayfish. I mean, there's crayfish probably in almost every type of freshwater habitat in Florida. They're in the springs. We find them in underground caves. Sometimes there's crayfish that live for like 50 years that live underground, and they have, they're totally white and they're blind. I mean, it's a really neat thing to study because there's so many different kinds. And I think they're on every continent except for Antarctica.
But they can be pretty specialized to a specific habitat then?
Yeah, so certain species are found only we have actually a lot of species that are found only in like a few streams or like a few lakes. So you can find crayfish everywhere, but different species have a home that's really specific usually.
That's pretty neat. Let's see. Can you remind us again how many different species there are?
650, and I think over that because we find more. People keep finding more and more.
Ooh, I like this question again. This Borders class would like to know, why are they only out at night?
Yeah, so that is a way that they're avoiding predators. So a lot of the fish that eat them use their eyesight to find the crayfish. So crayfish come out to eat at night so that they can't be seen by their predators.
And speaking of predators, will they ever go extinct? Why will they ever go extinct?
Yeah, so I think it's probably unlikely that all the crayfish would go extinct. But some of these species that live in only a few rivers or only a few lakes could go extinct, especially with the problem of invasive species coming in. So a species that wasn't there originally and causes some kind of ecological harm. And as you've seen in the video, they do interact quite aggressively with one another. And so that can be a reason why we see some species disappear.
Okay, now I have something in mind, but maybe you can elaborate on it a little bit. Is there anything humans can do to kind of cause that to happen?
Yeah, so I think one thing that, so humans are moving crayfish around. I mean, perhaps none of you have, but we move crayfish around. Either people might have crayfish as a pet in their aquarium, or they might use crayfish as bait for fishing. And so it's really important that if you collect a crayfish from the water, that you put it back where it came from, not somewhere else, because that could cause an invasion, even if it seems like you're just going a little ways. So that is a really good thing that everyone can do.
Okay, I like that. Let's see, we have a few more questions. I'm going to try to speed through these. Leon's class would like to know, is there a way to tell if they're male or female crayfish?
Yes, I don't know if I can show you, but maybe I can. Yeah, so they have these little appendages. This one is a female. They have these little appendages. This is not probably going to work, but you can look underneath the crayfish, and there's actually really obvious that there's two long appendages if it's a male, and then there's a little area where sperm can be stored if it's a female. So you can actually really easily tell which if it's a male or female.
Wow. All right, I think we have time for one last question. How did the crayfish get their name?
That is a great question. Do any idea?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know, but one thing I forgot to mention is the ancestors of these crayfish are lobsters. So these are lobsters, or like the ancestor of lobsters that lived in the ocean and then came into freshwater environments. So that's why they look like little tiny lobsters.
Okay, putting the pieces together, that makes sense.
Alan, this has been a fantastic session. Dr. Reisinger, Nicole, thank you so much for helping our students kind of learn how to make these fair or unbiased observations. Hopefully they'll come in handy for some of your STEAM showcase projects. We really appreciate you giving us that sneak peek into your lab. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be back on at 1 o'clock if someone from your school didn't get a chance to join. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.